Welcome back to Lively Conversations. I have such a special guest, or I should say I'm Renat Straloff, I'm your host, and I have a very special guest for you today. I'm so excited to be bringing you Veda Austin, and we're going to be talking about the secret life of water. Veda, welcome to Lively Conversations.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with you.
I'm going to read out a bio on Veda, but before I do, I just wanted to say, Veda, your incredible work and the insights they've had such a profound impact on my life personally and my relationship with water and the essence of existence itself. I know that sounds quite profound, but I just wanted to say that that what you've shared, the mysteries of water and its role in our world, it's like a shining star. It's a guiding star in my personal journey of understanding and appreciating the beauty and wisdom of water. So I just wanted to start off by saying a profound thank you. I am beyond excited to be having this conversation. It's, I think, one of the most important conversations we need to be having right now.
Oh, thank you so much. I always feel like we reflect each other. That's one of the wonderful things about water. You know, it's reflective, it's transparent. It's just such an important topic. So I received that with so much love. Thank you very much.
Now, Veda is a water researcher, public speaker, mother, artist, and author. She's dedicated the last 10 years observing and photographing the life of water. She believes that water is fluid intelligence, observing itself through every living organism on the planet and in the universe. Her primary area of focus is photographing water in its state of creation, the space between liquid and ice. It is through her remarkable crystallographic photos and water reveals its awareness of not only creation, but thought and intention through imagery. Veda brings a message of hope and joy from the very source of life itself. She says water is transparent. It knows no color, creed, or religion. Water does not judge, nor does it label. It will enter the body of an ant as easily as it will enter the body of a king or a homeless person or a tree or a dragonfly. Water is our constant companion. From the moment we are conceived, it is always with us. Even upon death, it is water that evaporates from the physical rising upwards into the heavens. Veda sees water as source rather than a resource and considers all bodies of water to be sacred. Her passion for water extends out of the freezer and into primary schools, where she donates time teaching water science and cleverly intertwines it with art projects. She loves to reconnect with children to the living water, systems inside and outside of their bodies, believing that the tamariki, which is children of the water, are bearers of the future. She also spends a lot of time doing interviews and podcasts like she's today, where she shares her findings and inspiring perspectives. That's one beautiful bio there, Veda.
Thank you. It's always nice to hear it back every now and then. It's like, gosh, yes, no, yes, I do think that. And I'm actually, after this, I'm going to teach a group of Montessori children how to do the crystallography that I do. So,
well, that's exactly what we're going to jump into today. Can you tell our audience, share your story of how you first became interested in water and what inspired this journey into water research, and probably ideally what is crystal, the methods in which you use that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's multiple levels to how I discovered that water can store information and share it within a specific state of freezing. So just to clarify, what is crystallography? In my world, crystallography simply means that I take photographs of water in a liquid crystal state. So my technique is very simple. Basically, I'm looking for there to be a liquid on top and ice underneath. I tip the liquid away and I photograph the remaining ice, which is in a liquid crystal stage that is called crystallography. In the very early days when I first began this work, I didn't know about this technique. I discovered it myself over a period of time and long-term observation. When I first started, I was curious because I had read about Masaru Emoto's work. I had seen various different other people. One person inspired me very much, a man by the name of Laurent Costa. He is a French microscopic photographer. So one of the differences between my work and Emoto's work and Laurent's work is that it's macroscopic. I take photos on my iPhone. I'm seeing these pictures and responses of water after it's been inspired in some way as imagery on the ice with my naked eye. And anybody can do it. So I don't need a cold room. I don't need a microscope, and neither do you. But their work was, as I'm sure many of your listeners will know, certainly about Emoto's, was bringing people into an awareness that water is sensitive to thoughts and words and sounds and music and environment. And by molecular count, not by volume, we're 99% water. That means there are more water molecules in our bodies than stars in the Milky Way. And it's crazy to me that we don't get taught more about the kind of water in our cells at school, or about the kind of water that's outside of our cells at school, because we're told mostly just about the hydrological system. But actually, we are, if you pardon the pun, boil it down, water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. So what I was curious about is, well, can water really store information? Does it really have this thing that people call memory? How is this possible? So you see and you read, but when you do something yourself, that brings you into a different, more concrete understanding. And so back then, 10 years ago, I didn't have a microscope, but I could see that the secret to these people's work was in the freezing state. There was a third person who inspired me to try this work I'm doing. I'm a researcher, so I can find all kinds of really remote things and like random, like hardly anyone's ever read about things. And I ended up finding out about a guy called Thomas Hieronymus, who was a radionic engineer. And he made a very interesting observation that when he went into a Parisian meat market on a very cold, cold day, he noticed that the freshly placed organs of the animal organs appeared to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. For example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ, and so on and so forth. And he had this hypothesis that there seemed to be some kind of life force energy still emanating out of these organs, even though they were no longer part of an animal, because they were very fresh. And he believed that that was because of the water in the blood. And so what he thought was happening was that each organ of any living being has something called a sonic signature. It's kind of like a cymatic imprint of form and function within the organ. And so he thought that the water within the blood of that organ was sharing information with the water in the air, which was very cold, and as it hit the glass, it froze and took on the form of that organ. And he was seeing this with the naked eye. So I thought, okay, look at Emoto's, he's flash freezing, Laurent's flash freezing, this guy's seeing, frozen images on the glass. So I'd got my petri dish of water. So I had some water that I'd had a healing experience with, which was some spring water. And I put that water into a glass petri dish. And so my idea in the beginning was simply to, maybe put a thought into the water and like freeze it in my freezer and just see what happened. I had zero attachment to any outcome at all. And so I'm looking at this dish going, oh, what am I going to think about? What thought shall I put into the water? And I noticed there was this little bit of fluff floating around in the dish of water. So I was like, oh my God. So I put my hand in to take out the fluff, consciously thinking, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's memory. And so I thought, well, that thought will do. I put it into the freezer with the peas and broccoli and all the rest of it, and I forgot about it. And hours later, I came back and I was like, oh, let's see what's happening in the freezer. So I took it out and held it up to the light, and I took my very first photograph of now 45,000 photos of water responding in the most intelligent, artistic way to the influence. What I saw that took up half of the petri dish, macroscopically huge, that is, an image of a hand. And what was fascinating was that the image of the hand in the ice was so undeniably a hand that when I did a survey years later, where there were 25 photographs, and I simply say, what does this look like to you? And I shared it on social media. There were I think there were 298 people did the survey. 100% of people were able to say that it looked like a hand. And so what was interesting is that it looked like an X-ray of the hand. And I inherited my mother's crooked fingers, these particular two, on this hand, sorry. And so they bend slightly. So I'm trying to show you, but obviously people are listening. So I have slightly bent fingers on either side of my middle finger. And so in the image of the hand were bent fingers and the same like mine. So it wasn't just any old hand. It was actually an imprint of the energy of my hand. And I was freaked out when I first saw it, because I'm like, oh my God, I was not expecting to see this. And that felt kind of like there was a little adjustment of a feeling of freaked out and excited. And then there was also that feeling that logical brain goes in and it goes, oh, well, maybe that was just a coincidence. So then I went to the ocean and I got some seawater, because I thought if any water is going to be naturally informed, it would be the ocean. So I just got some seawater and I froze that, and I was waiting outside the freezer going, oh my God, what's going to happen? Because if something in the ice is relative to the ocean and in this imagery, then maybe this isn't a fluke. So when I got it out, I took this photo, and it is just so clearly of a fish with scales and a perfectly round eye, the outline of the body with fins and gills. And I'm like, oh my God, well, let's try this and let's try this. And then my freezer became my most used household appliance. And then over doing this for a year, seeing imagery, which when I look back now, I'm amazed that I got the imagery that I did. Because when you completely freeze water solid, you miss out on so much. So Buddha was clearly wanting to share something with me to be able to see that kind of imagery. I started to learn more about the fourth phase of water by connecting with Dr. Gerald Pollack and learning more. His work is in alignment with the work of Marcel Vogel, and talking about this fourth phase of water, so liquid, solid, gas, and then a type of gel or plasma. That's the kind of water inside of our cells. It's also found within certain waters, particularly water that's been under pressure, like in deep underwater aquifers and springs. So it's more of a kind of a stretchy plasma. It has different aspects to it. It absorbs more light. It has negative charge. It's more viscous. There are certain aspects to that actually different. It's H3O2 rather than H2O, sorry. So it's got one extra hydrogen and oxygen atom. So it's interesting that it's kind of got these differences, but it's also more molecularly ordered. So as I started to learn more about that, I thought, well, maybe I'm missing something in the freezer. So I started to open it earlier and earlier, until eventually I noticed that there was liquid on top and ice underneath. And that was interesting to me. And that's after about 5 minutes of being in the freezer. So I pulled it out, and as I'm holding it up, the water just naturally came out. And then I realized, oh, yes, I have been missing a lot, because the crystallography is so clear. There's so much light coming through. It's 3-dimensional, and it's unbelievably, dramatically, quantumly different from completely freezing water. So that's how I began this journey. And then I think that I've noticed that water freezes in 3 states, and I relate them to spirit, blood, and body. The stage that I take my water out is the stage of spirit. The middle stage is where there's 2 layers of ice and liquid in between, like an ice sandwich. That's the state of blood. It's more, it's like, it's created like a tube with water through it. And then there is the solid stage, which is like the body covering all of them up. And so there's a lot of depth to this work, and there's tributaries everywhere that goes into water and spirit, like water and the air, the aspect of water being in the air, all kinds of different areas. So I love this work. It is such a passion, as you can probably tell.
What was really interesting listening to you speak, I mean, so many things were interesting, but particularly around thoughts and feelings. I know that I've had these discussions recently, quite a number of these discussions where, let's say in the New Age movement, people are expressing, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings. Clearly, water is responding to thoughts and feelings. What do you have to say about that?
Water is much more interested in what you're feeling than what you're thinking. That's what I've noticed. I'll give you an example. With another lady, because I teach how to do it, and there's thousands of people doing this work that I've taught, and also an experience of my own. So this lady, she was one of the first people to ever learn how to do this work. And all the week she'd been worried about her dog because her dog had been feeling sick, and she'd recently lost her other dog who had passed away. So she's doing this crystallography, and she's showing a picture of tulips. So I often use pictures as an inspiration, where I'll print a picture out, or I use a book or something, and I'll put my dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds, remove and freeze, and we'll often see something relative to that image. So she was trying this, and she had used some kind of picture of tulips. And she's from Slovenia. And so she uses this picture of tulips, but all week she'd been worried about her dog. And so when she does the crystallography, rather than see tulips, she sees a picture of her dog, and her dog is an Afghan dog with a long nose. So it's clearly identified actually as even the type of dog. And we ended up having a conversation, and she says, but I showed the water tulips. Like, why is it showing me a picture of my dog? And I said, because she told me the story about being worried about her dog. And I said, because water doesn't do small talk. Water is far more connected and interested in what you're feeling than what you're thinking. And another example of water doing this is because, I do this every day, just about every single day for the last 10 years, give or take a few days where I've had a holiday. And so sometimes I'm simply inviting water to share whatever it wants, or maybe I'm doing crystallography for somebody, for various people ask me to do stuff for them. And so if I'm genuinely feeling sad, like something's just upset me and I'm feeling sad, and I'm doing crystallography, if I'm showing the water, let's just say I have a pen in my hand right now. So we're using an example. Say I put a pen on top of the Petri dish of water, remove it, and I'm doing that crystallography with the influence of the pen, and I'm genuinely upset. Water will ignore me. It won't show me anything to do with the pen. It will show me everything to do with me. It designs sad faces. And if I am angry, which doesn't happen that often, but I have 3 children, there is traffic, there is stuff, life happens. Every now and then I'm frustrated and annoyed. And I use that as an opportunity to see how water responds to me in that mode of emotion. And water will never respond to me. It will never design complex imagery if I'm angry or frustrated. However, it has great compassion for me if I am sad. So water is not in judgment, but it simply doesn't resonate at that frequency of anger, manipulation. Here's a good one. I was asked years ago, can water be manipulated in the way that I do this work? I would never do this now, but I've started to share this example. I think I was felt so guilty about doing this. I didn't like sharing it, but I think it's good to see and good to talk about. So years ago, as my work was just starting to get known, someone said, but can you trick water? And so I said, okay, well, I'll try something. So as you've probably started to understand, I have a relationship with water. My father is native New Zealand Maori. We have we form relationship with the natural world. And so for me, relationship with water is a very, very organic and natural thought and idea and process. And so we're all bodies of water. It's easy. We know how to have relationships with water. We do it without even thinking. So one of the things that I spoke to the water, which might sound crazy to some people, but why not? I'm not being paid to do anything. I'm exploring and I'm teaching other people how to do this. I think the science is in the repeatability, the amount of people that are doing it, in actually the 44,000 photos that I have. And so I said to the water, can you show me something really, really amazing, like something really amazing? And I promise I won't share it with anybody. And I was lying. I was planning on sharing this whole big thing on social media. And I was, before the guilt really hit me, I put it in the freezer straight away. And then the guilt hit me after that. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. And I never really have an expectation of what water will show me, because that's not part of being in right relationship with water, and we can get into that. But anyway, it was in the freezer and I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen, if anything? And part of me was thinking, I bet it will just look disordered, because I was using spring water. So water has signature patterns, so you can know if it's spring water or rainwater or tap water or filtered water. So I knew the signature pattern of the water I was already using. So I pulled it out and I took a photo, and I'll never forget that photo. There was this disordered crystallography, which I sort of expected, I guess, even though I wasn't trying to expect anything. And there were two letters that were in the ice. And the two letters spelt no, N-O. And I was so taken aback that I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that again. I'm sorry. But there was like an absolute clear response. I guess water I did ask for something extraordinary, but it was a communication in a way that I wasn't expecting. And I've seen actual words in ice in different languages. It's just that English is the language that I speak. So, I've had some remarkable imagery that has taken me back, things that I just could not have imagined. So you asked about thoughts and you asked about feelings. I think of thoughts a lot like clouds that go by, that we always think having them, but we're the sky. So within us, I think about the things that water's shown me. For example, distilled water, which lacks the salts and minerals, is more of an observer. It's just sort of watching. So it has a signature pattern, but I don't get complex crystallography with it. Compared to spring water, which has salts and minerals in it, those salts and minerals help water to store that, not only observe, it has the ability to observe, but it also is storing information that can be shared. So we are salt water, we're not freshwater beings. So we are able to store and have memories. But we're also able to observe ourselves. So when you ask someone who had a near-death experience, which I've interviewed several, they have a sense of rising, which is what a gas does. And then they look down upon their bodies being resuscitated without any connection whatsoever to the physical body. And so they observe themselves. People have the sense of observing themselves when they have a psychedelic experience. They have a deep meditation where they can go into an observer. In dreams, we observe things going on. So we are complex systems of water with many layers of subtlety, just like water outside of a body. And we can observe ourselves, which is what I've seen in the aspect of distilled water. And we can also store information and share it. So what I like to do is work with water that has salts and minerals in it, because that's where I get the complex responses through imagery. So I have signature patterns. I have art, which most people know me for, where water designs imagery. And then I have hydroglyphs. And hydroglyphs are the area I'm getting more scientific appreciation for, because to get one hydroglyph, which is a symbol in ice, I need to have used a word influence. So I'll write a word, put my dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds. That means it's not too long, it's not too short. Take it off, freeze it, and then take a photo. If I see the same symbol appear at least 50 times using the same word, then I have one hydroglyph. And a hydroglyph is essentially a little bit like hieroglyphs, and that it's not a language that is designed to be spoken, but more of a language that is designed to be felt and seen. And so a hydroglyph is not a word, but it is an energy of a word. So rather than, if you imagine how long it's taken for us to actually say, write the word tree. The word tree is like one of the most kind of reduced ways for us to express an actual tree. And it's gone from like a picture, like from an idea, a thought, to a picture, to eventually become a written word. So water literally reverse engineers that word, which is why I like using words, to its living principle as a symbol. And we're learning that one symbol has multiple meanings of words that relate and interrelate with each other. So because there's so much repeatability, and I can show 64 examples of each symbol for each hydroglyph that I have, and I have people around the world helping me with them using different languages, that means we can literally read the ice, read messages in the water. And I have had 2 examples where people say, what is the most powerful thing that you've got done or discovered with hydroglyphs? And I have 2 stories that come to mind. One is that there was a lady who reached out to me, and her daughter is severely disabled, can't speak properly or really just make sounds, and can't use her hands, in a wheelchair. And her mum has tried everything to help her. Somehow she stumbled upon my work, and she reached out and she said, look, I don't know. I want to know if my daughter knows how much I love her. Is there any crystallography you can do? Is there anything? And I asked her, I said, just ask your daughter that question and then record any sounds she makes. So she recorded the sounds and she sent me the sounds that her daughter made. And I played those sounds into the water. And then I did the crystallography, and there were 4 hydroglyphs within that dish. One was the simple, that was the word that I call it the empty hexagon. That symbol means individual, and it also means I. So we have I. Then we had a heart, and with a heart always means love. And then we had the symbol, which has lots and lots of circles all together, which means multiple or many or a lot. And then we have the symbol for earth, which is like a speckledy pattern. We also need, that means mother. I love you so much, Mum. And I was privileged enough to be on FaceTime with her when she showed her daughter that and read that to her, and her daughter tried to clap her hands. And I think, oh my God, this is the power of water. This is the power of connection, of giving a voice to the voiceless. And then the other day, I was doing a beginner's workshop where I teach people how to do the work, and I was talking about all this. And this lady did some crystallography, and I was looking at it, and so she had the symbol where there's 2 circles touching. It means the word conception. She had 2 of them, and she had an image which I've recognized after doing so many different tests and work with water, which is the embryo. And anyway, I'm talking to her, telling her I see these symbols, and she's like, "You're freaking me out. Please stop. Please stop. Like, I need to talk to you." And she told me that she was a 7-year cancer survivor, and that they had literally just got an embryo, and they were doing like an embryo implant in a few days afterwards, and that that this was just blowing her mind. And you look at this and you realize that there is no time or sense of kind of space with this. Water is both be past, now, and in the future, and it is showing us things that are important. Even dogs, you can let your dog drink a bowl of water and you can see messages in there of what it will say. And so hydroglyphs, on top of the science and the repeatability, my personal feeling is that I'm doing that for the scientists, and because I'm trying to present it in a way which will relate to a lot of people. But it's the stories, it's those stories, those are the things that matter. I mean, water is so much more than we think it is, and I think one of the things we tend to forget is because we're in a body and we see water as outside of ourselves, as something that we've been conditioned to think is just cleanses us, hydrates us, that is there for us, and forget that when we drink it, it becomes us. That we are this intelligent fluid system with so much wisdom within us, and that we are just starting to remember. We're just starting to remember. Even the word hydrogen, and there's like, you think of the sun, you think of fire, you don't think of water. But actually there's so much to do with water. Hydrogen itself, like the sun, is a big ball of hydrogen. Hydrogen means the creator of water. So evaporation is literally water being taken back to source. I went on a tangent, sorry.
I went along for the ride, Veda. That was amazing. You talked about, I wrote it down, right relationship with water. Could you explain that a bit more?
Yeah. You talk with a lot of people that know a lot about indigenous, ancient wisdom, and then you talk to the indigenous people. For example, in New Zealand, the Whanganui River was the first river to be given rights of personhood, because the tribe for many, many years had been seeing the belly of the river being scraped, the gravel being taken out. They saw that its mouth there was effluence coming out of the mouth of the river. They saw, even worse, the headwaters being diverted to Maori. The head is the most sacred place, so they thought of this as aquatic decapitation. And because they believed that the water houses their ancestors, and they have a responsibility not to own water, but to care for their water sources, for those areas, for those lakes, for those rivers, and to be a caretaker. They felt their job was not being done. And so they went to the government and petitioned, and actually eventually this river was given rights of personhood, and that tribe cares for it now. And that knocked on to the Ganges and the river Yamuna in India, although that's very, very difficult to manage because so many people go there. It's such a sacred river, but it's considered a living entity. And so by being in right relationship with water is by even acknowledging that water is there. It's quite an interesting thing, because whenever we drink water, we tend to just drink it, because we live in a first world country for many of us. I've spent a lot of time in India, where people have to walk a long way to go and get water, and in Africa they have to do the same thing. Their relationship with life, that is water, in the hope that at least it can be like filtered, is so different than our relationship where we turn on a tap and we have, you know, our biggest problem in the West is, what water should we drink? That's one of my number one questions. What's the best water for me? How privileged we are. Drink the water in your glass. Do you know, it's been through the clouds and the trees and the rivers. It's been through the earth. It's been through the animals. It's been through the dinosaurs. It's been through your ancestors. That water, and there is only nearly 1.2 to 2% of drinkable water on this planet, on the surface of Earth. I'm not talking about primary water. And that has managed to get into your glass. How privileged are we that it's there, what it can teach us, what it can share with us. So when it comes to this, the little bit of this idea of our relationship with water, the first thing that water touches when you drink it is your saliva. Your saliva is so much percent water, and it holds the last word or sentence that you spoke as a frequency in your mouth before you drink. Now, I've done studies on all different kinds of bodily fluids as well. So I'm interested in liquids and things to do with water. And so I would literally spit into a petri dish after saying a word or a sentence to see if there was any information of that word or sentence in the saliva when it was frozen. So an example that I like to give was, I was talking about the number 8. I was on the phone to a friend and we'd been talking about that. I just basically spat into the petri dish after talking about the number 8, and in one of the bubbles that froze, there was a literal stamped number 8, that it was really remarkable and so clear. And then that brings us back into the power of our words. You know, when we're speaking, your body is listening. Bruce Lee, he says, never speak badly about yourself, because your body is always listening. He also said, be like water. Water becomes the cup. It becomes the teapot. What if water has become the human? What if water is actually, you know, you expressing its consciousness through all of us and through every living thing to observe itself from every different perceivable perspective? So relationship is where you acknowledge that the water in your glass has information. It has energy. It is a life force unto its own. And when we drink it, you can have the most premium spring water, you can have all of the stuff, but you are the welcoming committee. If you are not welcoming this water into this environment that you are, then it's like ignoring a relative that knocks on your door. If there is no thank you, or no even mental thank you or welcome, then the water is literally being ignored as you're drinking. So if you've got the most beautiful water and you think it's only that water that's going to help you, no, you've forgotten the power of this expression of gratitude, the power of connection and relationship, because the best water in the world coming into an environment which is just ignoring it is completely different than a filtered tap water that is coming into your body with gratitude and love and hope. And that is, I've seen it multiple times happen, where people with such loving intention and observation and gratitude and relationship with this life force energy, which can only not be called alive or a living thing because it doesn't have carbon, but we also don't understand it. So we're only taught, we think it rains, therefore that's where the water comes from, the clouds, but water came from 2 places according to science, and the science is out. They argue about which one it is. Some science thinks it came from asteroids and meteorites, making it literally an alien substance of which we are by molecular count made up of by 99%, and it came from the primary water, which is held within the ringwoodite inside the Earth's mantle, and there is more of that drinkable water, which has very, very small amount of minerals, than there is on all of the water, including the oceans on the surface of Earth. And whenever I've posted that on social media about primary water, it gets taken off with no explanation. Because where there is scarcity, there is value. And if you really, really look at it, when we are so much potential of water, and our eye lens even is 99% water, which means we literally see the world through the lens of water, then every time we're bottling water, we are literally selling ourselves. We're selling our ancestors. We're selling parts of the natural world and the energy of the people that have drunk it before and removed it, and it's gone through out of their body back into the seas. Water really should be available to everyone. What we are doing is we just don't see it because we haven't formed the relationship. My whole job, I think, it's not that I'm doing this work. Water is doing this work with me. It has a voice and it has so much to say. It literally can be the mouthpiece for nature. And it speaks so beautifully. When I asked water, what is a hydroglyph? I got the image for message and the image for living. It has living messages. The way in which it speaks is so beautiful. And I think that when we realize this is what we are, and even to spirit, you know, what leaves the body, when you are, like I said, water, salts, minerals, and consciousness, right? And so when someone passes away, the salts go back to the earth. If somebody is cremated, the ashes are salts. The water evaporates. And I think there are two different aspects to this water. In the Maori language, the word for spirit is wairua. It means two waters, the physical and spiritual waters. The spiritual aspect of water is in relationship with the air, with the ether aspect of either one of those. And just because we can't see something doesn't mean it's there. All around us there is air, but there is water in the air. The fact that we breathe out means there is water in the air. Essentially what that does is give us this kind of a web of information, because that water is attracted to electrical charge which comes off the body. So one of the reasons we get these gut feelings about things is that the information exchange from outside to inside comes directly into our intuition, which is a direct reflection of what water is sensing and experiencing from the outside, coming through this electrical charge of the body into the inside. So this explains so many things, and this idea of spirit, you know, that people have then as an observer effect when they explain what they've had when they have a near-death experience. And also I think it's nice to talk about the salt, you know, salt too, it disappears when you put it into water, but when you let that water evaporate, oh, the salt is still there. When you burn it, it doesn't die essentially. So you're made of these immortals. Water, we can say that's dead water, we can say it's polluted water, but it will always evaporate and become in these different stages again. So it is an immortal that we literally see. And salt too, salt will keep growing. Salt's an interesting thing. And then when it disappears completely in water, but hello, there it is again. So when we study the things that we're made of, and then you add this idea of consciousness, and what is consciousness, and how could water possibly be conscious? Surely it's your consciousness impacting the water. Well, that's a good question, which I've also done studies on. But I've done the study more from the perspective of firstly realizing you can't take away the fact that you're a conscious observer, even if you are from a distance. So when am I not conscious in this way? That's when I'm sleeping. There's the subconscious takes over. So I've done studies where I've got a petri dish of water, placed it by my bed with the intention that it captures some part of my dream, because I dream a lot, and it's in the dark. And so in the morning when I wake up, you know, when you wake up and you've got that, I know I had a dream. And then the more you try to cling on to the dream, the more it disappears, the faster it goes. So when I've had that experience, that's when I freeze it. Because if I remembered the dream, I could project a thought into the dream, into the water, sorry. And so when I knew I'd dreamt but forgotten it, I would freeze the water. And what was interesting was that the imagery that I got in the ice was almost clearer than the water that I use in my day-to-day world in the crystallography. So back when I was doing that study, I was living on a farm and there were a lot of sheep. So I was dreaming about sheep, and the image of the sheep was so cute and so clear that it jogged my memory of the entire dream. And I was able to write the dream down and record that. So when the imagery was so clear, it would literally jog my memory. And so another one was where I was walking along train tracks through a tunnel, and there was literally a train tracks with a tunnel shape. And so what I started to come to realize is that there is very little we know about what it is to be water, except that water is there for good. It's really, really there for the betterment of all humanity and all life and nature, and to remind us that it's the one thing we don't fight about. We all know that we can't live without water. We all know that water has life-giving properties. And I think that when you find something that we can all agree upon, even down to religion, I did a webinar which was all about learning about the significance of water in different religions as well as different indigenous beliefs. What was incredible about that 3-day webinar of 12 hours a day from people all around the world, from all different religions, was everyone was pretty much saying the same thing, that water is love. And it is the connecting force of all life. And that water and spirit are surprisingly intertwined. There have been studies I've done around that, or not a study, that sometimes I do a lot of things just because they're personal to me. So I had a very, 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 very close relationship with my mum. My mum died of cancer in 1999. And she was my best friend. She really was just an angel. And I used to live in Japan, and when she was alive, and I used to get incredibly homesick. And so we would write letters to each other, because it was before cell phones and like before all that. You know, I sound like prehistoric, but anyway, so we would write letters, and at the end of every letter, my mum would make some attempt to draw a circle, because her circles were so bad. They looked like some kind of map of Australia. And then she'd do a little heart in the middle. And so I kept all her letters, and they were so personal to me. I still have them in this little wad of letters. And she'd just talk about her day and but she'd always end with a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle. And so I don't know, 7 years ago or whatever it was, I was really missing her. And I just said to the water, can you please connect to my mum? And my mum always used to say to me, you know, I'm always going to be there with you, no matter what, even when I pass. I'll always be there for you. And I froze the water, and this misshapen circle with a heart in the middle came out. And so it just, you know, it was like, you know, she never left. And we forget. We think we are our body, you know, and we feel through this body, and it's such a gift that we have. But our entire life, this entire life, that we are so sure this is our life, is memories. Every single part of our life, up until this last thing I just said, is a memory. And we say this is our life 100%. So those memories, they mean so much to us. So one of the greatest gifts that we have, and that we leave behind in the heart of others, which is actually us, is a beautiful memory. We leave the memories of ourselves in the hearts of those that love us. So my mum, she lives inside of me, and water sees that, and she's never not there. And I've seen this multiple times now. So I know that water and spirit, they are together. And we just don't know enough about water. There's so many stages. There's over 300 different types of ice, and there is many subtleties in that. There are so many different things about the air that we do not understand about that water and that gaseous state. That I think, if we can start just recording the subtle layers of water in the air around spirit, we would probably be able to see spirit leave. And I think, when you have these different types of water, so I think there is this spiritual aspect of a certain water within us that stays with us. And then we have the water that also flows through us. And there's these original cells. I can't remember if they're the 7 or 8 original cells that when our body was starting to develop, in the embryonic stage, when the cells were starting to divide, that don't actually change like all the other cells do. They stay with us. And the water within them, I think, that's where the connected part is there, where it stores and holds all of these memories of these blueprints of what it is to be human. So I think even when you look into like ancient Greek texts and things like that, they would go into the underworld and they would have to cross over, pay money to go across the river to go to Hades, where they would come to a certain amount of rivers. 2 of them were the river of the forgetfulness and the river of remembering. And most people would drink from the river of forgetfulness and forget what happened, only to come back again with a new start. And then some would drink from the river of remembering, and they would often be sent back to go and share, because they could then see before and now and after as kind of prophets and wise people. And so throughout our history, we have been talking about water with these different nuances and perspectives. And I think as science evolves with the study of water, which I think is so essential for the study of life, then we might actually start to see some things that matter to us as human beings in relation to spirit, in relation to love, in relation to what it is to actually embody our biggest potential. And one of the greatest things that water has shown me, and there's been so many, is when I have my petri dish of water, I put a seed, a sunflower seed, into the water for a few seconds and take it out. Water reads potential. Rather than just design the seed, it designed the outcome of the seed. It designed the sunflower. Same thing with the flax. I put the seed of the flax in. We have all these beautiful flax trees growing outside here. And the flax comes from the pods, from the flowers, from the fruit of the tree. And it designed the flowers and the fruit of the tree. But when I put a pistachio shell into the water with no nut, it just designed the shell. So water is always reading our potential, ready to step into it at any moment. It's already seen it, always from the beginning, seen the biggest potential that we have. And I am ever grateful for that, because there's no moment when you can't know that something sees everything in you when you can't see it yourself.
Veda, that might be the most profound thing I've ever heard. I have cried so much during this interview. I'm glad that I didn't have to speak, because it was like reading my favorite book. I knew this interview was going to be something else, but you've just taken it to depths that I wasn't prepared for, to be very frank. The goosebumps all over my body, and I just want to come back to what you said, that this symbol, this, water is often considered this symbol of purity and life. The way you express that felt so pure and so full of life. The way that water relates to the idea of sacredness, to connection, to all living beings. You've even mentioned, I've read things that you've talked about how water can't be killed, it reincarnates, and could you share more about the eternal and resilient nature of water and how maybe even science supports that idea?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, when you look at, well, it's quite simple, when you watch water evaporate, especially when you're boiling water. I'm one of those crazy people that do all kinds of things with water. And I was curious, well, what if you what if you take photos of water at boiling? Well, it's sort of, is there any possible imagery that can occur in that's relative, to me watching it? So I took these photos. I mean, all of these I share. So I was hovering over the saucepan, wiping the camera because it was steaming up and looking, and I just took photos. And I went through the photos later. And of course, you see the bubbles. That's what, of course. But there was this one in the bubbles where it's literally, you can see it's not just a bubble. It's like there was a skirt and a torso and a face and 2 arms, and I was wearing a dress. I'm like, you're kidding me, even in boiling water. And what's interesting is that and anyone can do this, when you're boiling water, before it starts bubbling, it will start to, if you look into the pan, you'll see these tubes, little sort of weird tubes that form inside, and they kind of move and swirl around. Water has created tubes for the water to start to come out as steam, as vapor. So it's so intelligent in that it creates a way out for this next stage. So in hydroglyphs, which I've explained about, the word for living is the same for the word as death. A man reached out to me and he said by the doctors had gone and told him that he only had 3 months to live. And can I please ask water what death looks like? And so I was like, okay. So I wrote the word death, and I kept seeing this living hydroglyph. And I'm like, oh gosh, what's this about? So I did it over and over again until, of course, it dawned on me. Well, from the perspective of water, water never dies. The word death to water is another word for life. It's always in one of its stages, and it knows and prepares itself for these stages. So it is there's an understanding with these little tubelets that Dr. Jerry talks about, Dr. Gerald Pollack. These little tubes, they're like what we might call, where we go through a tunnel and we see a light and we come out. Water is literally having a new experience by going from its one stage to its next stage. And in the vapor stage, then it's always going up into the heavens. And so then, these stages where water then goes and collects in the clouds, and then it rains, or it comes down as snow, and it then eventually becomes like this liquid water, and then there's this whole process. And so, and it has a very intimate relationship with salt. So anything that is alive in our world has water as well as salt. So it's the salt that gives us the ability to have this memory, these memories. And the water that is the ultimate observer, never in judgment, may I add, but it does have a resonance that it resonates at, and it's a higher resonance than the lower vibration. And so when we are bringing in all of our thoughts and things like that, the thought aspect, that's an interesting one, because our thoughts are often regurgitated thoughts that we've picked up from other people. We get taught how to think quite often by going to schools and different things, and so we're taught the way of this civilization, right? But I do a lot of webinars with people that talk about ancient Egypt and the ancient world. And one of the things my friend Venice, she says, she was the director of a series called Magical Egypt, and she says, right now we are living in the most materialistic civilization ever. And we are trying to understand the most unmaterialistic civilization ever with our materialistic mind. What I think we still have in common is our feelings and is our heart and our compassion and our ability to care. You know, one of the definitions this lady gave, her name escapes me, which there was this question, you know, well, what was the first sign of civilization? And most people will go to the architecture and, you know, these ancient buildings and what's left behind. And she said, no, one of the first signs of civilization is when they investigated a skeleton from many thousands of years ago that had a broken leg, that the leg had been reset. And she's like, people had to sit and care for that person over a long period of time and make sure that that person was okay, because otherwise they're going to get eaten. And to care for someone for that period of time to help them heal until they are well again is really the first sign of civilization. What is it to be civilized? Is to care. And so by this idea of water going in these different phases, I think we also find that within ourselves. We have our own cycles, we have our own emotions, we have our own feelings. But at the beginning and the end of our lives, in the beginning, we are probably at some of our wisest. When you see a newborn baby and you see their eyes are so clear, they see you with all love. They see you, as a mother to mother, you know, you're their everything. You never get seen with so much love in such a pure way. They only know how to love like that. And then towards the end, that's why it's so beautiful when our old people and our young people can be together, because they're so close to the same thing. That bridge, you know, to spirit. And the older people, you know, there's a certain surrender that happens when you become older and you know it's your time. They even have, I was watching this thing where this doctor was saying about people in care and hospices and how they will often sit up and they have this clarity and about an hour to a day before they die, where they say goodbye to their friends and family, where sometimes even people with Alzheimer's, which have been so unwell for so long and not remembered people for years, will have maybe an hour or half an hour of clarity, and then they'll pass on. There is such a surrender in the moment of death. And how often do we actually surrender to what is in this world? We're going. And I think that there is such a beauty in these times, such beautiful things in these times, of the things that we've been taught to be afraid of. And I think in the old world, in the old times, they understood, which is why water wasn't even called water. In old England, water was called the waters, because it was considered to be a sacred living body. That's why it's called a body of water. And when Romans brought plumbing into being, people could watch their effluents going away by water. Water, with the word the water, was reduced to water. And then after that, we reduce it to H2O. But where waters is still in our language, in the English language, is when we say her waters broke. We know that it's still the sacred water. So there is so much we've forgotten in such a short period of time, but we haven't really forgotten, because everyone knows a feeling when something feels true for them. Sometimes those tears that we both were sharing today, I always say, if eyes are the windows to the soul, then tears are an expression of spirit. It comes out We can see it in our tears. Tears are like emotion we can literally see, taste, and touch. In our deepest sorrow, those tears that come out of our eyes, our face is designed in such a way that the tears come around our cheeks towards our mouth because they've been reordered and restructured to be a medicine to help heal our hearts. You know, there's just so much. And I think that within the science, you know, I really support the water science community, and they've had a hard time. I'm helping in a very simple way, but I'm helping to promote the next water conference next year that for these scientists that are bringing out this important work. Because last year not enough people signed up to go. It was unbelievable to me. And so I'm just trying to get people to realize this, the people that are actually studying water within the scientific realm are doing really amazing work. And it's hard for them because they don't get funding, hardly funded at all. Dr. Gerald Pollack's our leading water scientist in the world. He's 80 and he puts these on. He's talking about the fourth phase of water. He's giving the science to bridge some of what we're talking about here, and the quantum physics too. That's a way in which really does help explain some of this. And people ask, well, how does this work? And I'd like to talk about light very quickly because I know we're probably running out of time. So we emit light, humans emit light, and so water is a container of photonic light. And I was interviewing a lady who told me that she could speak to bees. So I'm already speaking to water. So bees, yeah, I can totally get it. So she was talking to bees, and she said she would watch their hives for a really long period of time. And one day a bee communicated to her, and somehow it said, "We don't mind you looking at our hive, but please don't look at it for such a long time, because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we like it to be darker." So where we put our conscious expression is also where we put our light. So I've taken photographs of water just as it's beginning to freeze. It sends these little ice shoots out. At the end of the ice shoot is light, which I've photographed. I think it is light that paves the way for the design of the imagery. It is light from our conscious expression and light from our eyes that shares information with water. The water receives the light and it takes that light as information and it translates that light in the environment where it has a conversation with you, which was in the stage of ice. There was a scientist by the name of Gennady Krokalev. He's a Russian scientist and psychiatrist. Now, he was working with psychiatric patients that were having visions and hallucinations, and he worked with them for 20 years. And he had learned about this idea that the retina of the eye can share information like a hologram, which can be photographed. So he did a bunch of experiments where he made these makeshift goggles with like a scuba diving mask. He took the lens out and he used a black and white camera called a zenith camera, which has a box that comes out. And he kind of attached that to the goggles. So there was no light coming from the outside. And he was photographing the retina of his patient's eyes whilst they were having a vision or a hallucination, calmly and quietly, and asking them what they were seeing and recording that. Of the 200 patients that he did this with, 117 of them were able to confirm that these black and white images on the photo were in fact the images what they were seeing. And what was very sad, but has happened way too many times, Gennady Krokalev rang his brother 3 hours before he died, and he said, "I made a discovery that it will change the world." When his brother came to see him, he was hanging. And so his work was confiscated. His work was made classified. And I've managed to find some photos that I share on my webinars and whatnot. But what was interesting also is that some more Russian scientists within the last 15 years took this work seriously, and they repeated it. But they didn't use people who were mentally or psychologically challenged. They used someone who could remote view. So they set the same thing up, used a scuba diving mask, took the lens out, used the same kind of old-fashioned black and white camera, and they had her sitting down calmly. The scientist stood behind a wall and held up numbers and shapes up. And as she tuned into them in her mind's eye, then the person would take the photo. And they were able to show, there's the number 1, there's the triangle. And it shows up as light, as white, and a black background. And so they did a documentary called something like Thought is Material. It's in Russian with some English subtitles, or sub-dubbed over English. It's not, you have to kind of get through it because it's not that great unless you speak Russian, which is probably brilliant. But there were 2 hypotheses from all of this. Gennady suggested the one perhaps that was not so popular, but he also kind of was in alignment with the other. The one that was not such a popular theory scientifically was that perhaps there is a secondary realm of consciousness that we simply can't see, and yet some people can, and that maybe some animals can see. The second one is that the brain sends information to the retina of the eye, which is mostly water. And that information is then translated as imagery, which comes out of our eyes, kind of like a hologram, of which can be captured on camera. This is this idea of thoughts become things, like what Buddha says. And so this is very interesting because, then we are literally like walking around with our thoughts in front of us. So some of us are walking around, we're more transparent than we think we are. And I think that what was interesting about that was the way in which they were able to capture these images. So I'm always looking for things that sort of are in alignment with my work somehow. So for that work, it had to be something clear in your mind's eye or it wouldn't work. That all the scientists tried it and did it too. So that was interesting because for me, I don't have to have that very, very clear image. The more I come into relationship, where it's just, if you kind of imagine the stages of relationship, I'm in what might be called as like the family stage, where, when you meet somebody and you want to look your best and you're super interested in them and you're putting your best foot forward, which happens so commonly in relationships. And then like a year later, some people do like Instagram reels about it. Like, here's us when we first met, and here's us now, where we're like, no makeup and track pants and whatever, and like, whatever. And so, but there is a deepening of understanding of transparency of that person, their idiosyncrasies, there is an acceptance of the way we actually are and the way we want to be and all the different facets of our personality. As I've come to become into what I might call, I hope, is right relationship with water, I see that the more natural I am, the more this is like a friendship. Let's do this. Sometimes it comes into like an intimacy where it's like, gosh, how much I love water, how this is my there's levels of relationship, and which levels of relationship do we want, or do we, and so for me, I find that I'm so interested in what water wants to share with me. So often it's a spiritual teacher for me. So often I'm reminded of sharing my own honesty and transparency. Water is the ultimate lie detector test. I think you wanted to touch on some things around EMF too, before we end. So I've done years ago when 5G first came out, and I would put, so I've mentioned already that water has a signature pattern. So this has been very helpful for me. So the signature pattern of spring water when it's freshly collected, and I've done the crystallography within like maybe 6 hours of collecting, you should see a very large hexagonal pattern with a star in the middle and ferns off each one. It looks a lot like a snowflake, but it's very, very much the same for each time. Each snowflake has differences, whereas sometimes they're virtually identical, some of these hexagonal patterns that you see in spring water. They change the longer water has been sitting in a bottle. They degrade and become smaller, and they go from a hexagon to a flower shape, to a leaf shape, to a grass shape, to a line, to a dot. And when we see tap water, we see lots and lots of lines and dots and variations. So when we have the hexagonal shape, we know, okay, this is my spring water. I know what it looks like. You see it thousands of times, you recognize, I know that. So I put it by the 5G tower for the very first time, and I left it there for 15 minutes. And when I refroze it within an hour, I wasn't that far away at the time. And it was completely disordered, completely disordered. Looked like some of the worst tap water that I've frozen. And I saw that, and I'm like, oh gosh, water's had a big shock. It had like a big reaction. But what's really interesting is that after seeing that, over the course of the last few years, I did another test. And so what I will do, which I think is also helpful for people to know, because I often get asked this question, is like, well, how long does that last, right? So I will let the water melt, and then I will refreeze it. So I do that until I see some patterns that look like the original patterns I started with. So when I did that with the first one, it took about, and you have a small amount of water, so you can only do it so many times. So I did it as many times as I could, which was 8 times, until I finally saw some life coming back into the crystallography. And that's quite a lot. That's quite a long time. And I was kind of concerned about that. But in the last year or year and a half, I did exactly the same thing. And I used the same water source as well. I collect the same water. So I got the crystallography, what you might call control. I hate these words we use for things, but anyway. And then I put the same water by the 5G tower. And I saw, okay, there was a shock, there was a disorder. And then I continued to do the melt and refreeze, melt and refreeze. And you know what was so interesting is that the first one was the shock, the disorder. The next one, I saw a hydroglyph, which meant message. The hydroglyph for message was in there, and there was a hydroglyph for information. Water gave a message of information to itself. The next image was beautiful crystallography of spring water again. Water had literally upgraded to introduce its own intelligence as to, I know this frequency, I can overcome. This is in alignment with when I was interviewing a friend of mine called Isabel, and she was telling me about a scientist she knows that works with some very advanced equipment with frequency. So they put a really negative frequency into the water. And she said, but as long as they gave water time, like half an hour or time to breathe and rest, the water would come back to its vitality. What was most interesting to me, though, she said when they put this negative frequency into the water and extended that over a really long time, rather than just shrivel up and die, water gave a huge reaction back. It literally made this huge impact and pushback on this equipment and nearly blew his $1 million machine up. And when he said what happened to other scientists, they said, water can't do that. And he's like, I just saw water do that. Like I said, I've said this before, there is so little we know about water. There is so little we know about our own potential. I think we live in a world full of the most incredible potential because we live in two worlds, the world we live on and the world we live in. This world we live in is literally full of every possible potential. And because we are mostly water, salts, minerals, and consciousness, we are here to be living our greatest potential. And that potential is simple. It's to love ourselves and to love others, to be in gratitude, to simply understand that even with the world of water, through this lens that we see the world through, we're literally seeing it through water. And it speaks to us in the most beautiful ways. And half the time, if we could see ourselves the way water sees us, we would be so happy. We wouldn't be looking in the mirror going, oh, this wrinkle, this pimple, oh God, I wish I could change myself. Water doesn't see any of that stuff. Water sees you. It sees itself, and it has so much compassion.
Oh, Veda, I can't even thank you enough. You know, the fact that so many people listening on, you know, the topic is lively conversations, how we live life lively, and you've just spelt it out for us in such a poetic way. You know, this idea that, like you say, water is not just a natural resource; it is source, which is what we've come back to time and time again in this interview. The purity of that, and the fact that you're just about to go and spend time teaching water science to children in schools, how to connect with the water, and these art projects that engage our young minds. I mean, I've got a 6-year-old and I can't thank you enough, because I am so looking forward to what the future of this type of water, I guess, inquiry is going to do for our future generations. And what you've just expressed so beautifully and embarked on in the last decade of work is, as I've said, is such a symbol of purity in life. And, you know, the inspiration that you've left is like a permanent mark on myself. I think I'm forever changed as a result of this interview. And I'm sure it'll go for this audience as well, because you are a true luminary in this world of water research, and it extends far and wide, and you've had such a profound impact. And I just want to say, wow, I don't really have much more to say than you were just channeling from a place. I felt goosebumps going through my body the entire interview. I didn't even know how to like sit with what the reactions were. I was just in awe, in absolute awe of the delivery of your messaging. And thank you. And I do want to ask if you have any final words of wisdom before we let you go, and also where people can support your work, Veda.
Sure. Well, I guess one of the things that I always ask the children, I say to them, if your skin was invisible and your organs were see-through, what would you look like? And they always come back to streams and rivers and tributaries. And one very interesting boy, he said, he's so clever, he said, I'd look like a brain-shaped cloud with electrical rain shining down in the shape of a person. And in the same question, I say, you know, if your skin was invisible and your organs were see-through, you know, what would you look like? And also, how would you recognize your parents? And the children say, I always remember this one little girl, she said, I'd always recognize my mummy because of the way she feels. And all of the potential is there. You know, we're all source. Sometimes we're all looking for something, but it's all there. You know, the most simple things are the most real. Sometimes we think things need to be so complicated. It's the most complicated thing, therefore it must be right. I think it's just things are simple. The more simple they become, the more easy they are to teach. And I think for the next generations coming through, to be able to see themselves as beautiful bodies of water that literally can flood the world, that's what's coming. That's what I'd like to see. If people, God, I feel emotional saying that. So if people would to reach me, just my my website's my name, VedaAustin.com, and Instagram's VedaAustin_water. And so, yeah, people can reach out and learn how to do the technique and come on some of my webinars. So I'd love to see you there. I'm going to be doing a live tour for next year. I hope to come to Australia, and so I'll be in the States and Europe and England and Mexico. So yeah.
Well, we're definitely going to continue cheering you on, Veda, and supporting your work. And thank you for reminding us how incredibly beautiful the experience of water is for our lives. And like you said, in, of, within, without, as so within, as so without. And water surrounds us at all times, and it is like source, as you've so brilliantly explained. Thank you, Veda, for your work. Thank you, Veda, for this conversation. And thank you, Veda, for what you're going to bring us in the future.
Thank you so much.